So I've been on a mission to understand the problems entrepreneurs need to solve in order to create momentum in their business. And especially in the market today, creating a high quality offers and delivering it well is often overlooked. So what's key is for business owners to simplify their operations to the point where they can grow their business and spend less time in the company working in the business, right? So finding ways to calm the chaos. As the business grows, the business becomes more chaotic for the business owner. Put predictability into the business. Get the entrepreneur out of the day-to-day and empower a operator to run the day-to-day in a way that has massive confidence for the owner and the operator. So today I want to focus specifically on the entrepreneur and how to get out of that day-to-day running, which eventually becomes the bottleneck for most businesses as they start to grow and scale. Even when the owner has got people to help and assist, eventually that becomes the plateau, that the glass ceiling they can't break through. But there is a way to break through, and thousands of companies have broken through that glass ceiling. But unfortunately, that's a very small proportion. Probably about 10% of all small businesses ever get through that kind of a glass ceiling. So today I'm going to cover the entrepreneur's impact multiplier. It's really about how do you, as the owner, founder, CEO, or entrepreneur, how do you start to create more and more impact in your role as the leader of the business? So I'm going to change your mind of how you're going to spend your time in the next 90 days. That's my goal. I hope I'm going to be able to do that. Change your personal game. So make sure that you've got more time, more focus, feel more in control of the business, and make a bigger personal impact on the business and where it's going, while at the same time maintaining your mental health. You don't want to be overwhelmed. You want to do less, but of what you want to do, you want to be more impactful. So the big moment for me in the past has been that in the modern economy today, our results are no longer dependent purely on our time and our effort only, as it was 30 years ago. So when we focus on time and effort, then people are rewarded for the time put in, or the effort that they've given, or the attitude that they bring to the party. Now, I'm not saying that those things aren't important, but they're not the thing. They're not the differentiator these days for the leader of the company. The big challenge is we're brought up with certain mindsets that are keeping us locked up in a particular way of work, and those kind of mindsets are things like you must put in the hours if you want success, right? You can have anything you want if you just work hard enough for it. You've got to put in the sweat equity before you can benefit. You want something done right, you've got to do it yourself. Or success comes from outworking your competition. Right? Now, I'm not disparaging any of these things. I'm just saying that if that's your main driver of how you create value, then you, as the leader or the CEO, you're going to miss the boat, right? Because in this new modern economy, the next level of growth is driven by, or your success is driven by, creating value for your company. And creating that value is not necessarily linked to putting in time and the effort anymore, right? It used to be like that, but it's less and less like that for the leader of the company. Yeah? So example that I like to use is, let's say Wednesday morning you got 4 hours. You can spend those 4 hours reading and answering emails, responding to messages, doing some admin things, firefighting, whatever comes up, just reacting to whatever comes up in the business, maybe attending meetings that are a hell of unproductive, or you could spend those same 4 hours with a good prospect that results in a new client and brings in new income. Or you could spend those same 4 hours maybe with a strategic partner that results in an introduction to 20 new clients this year. Okay? And with technology available these days, you could be linking with anybody globally on Zoom, as an example, over that period of 4 hours, and create a partnership that could tremendously benefit your company. Right? You couldn't do that 20, 30 years ago. You didn't have all the technology available to have that instant communication. Right? So the key here, the secret sauce, right, is for the owner or the entrepreneur or the founder or the CEO of the business to start to focus their time differently and focus on fewer things, higher value things that are going to make the magnified contribution to your business's growth. Like spending that time with a JV partner who could introduce 20 new clients, rather than being tied up with all the reactive things that are thrown your way in the day-to-day operations of the business. And by focusing on these fewer things that are of real consequence and value to the business, by knowing that by focusing on less, you actually accomplish more. Your business has greater value and grows faster as a result, right? So, understanding this concept as a concept isn't good enough to achieve success. The key is you've actually got to find the routines and the habits to do every day, and that is really driven by the way that we think about things, right? This model that we carry around in our head actually determines what we do every day. Okay? And if we carry the wrong model in our heads, we're not going to get to the point where we feel it's okay not to be that busy. But knowing that by not being that busy, we're working on the right things, the high value things that have an exponential impact on the growth of the business. Right? So you've got to ask yourself, and you've got to ask yourself openly and honestly, which model are you working from? What's your mental model? Right? Do you think and display behaviors like, if I want things done, I've got to do it myself? So putting more things on your own plate instead of putting it onto somebody else's plate, because you've got this urge to do it yourself. Right? Think things like, if I want success, I must put in the hours. So start feeling guilty when you're not doing 120 hours a week or whatever, right? Reward, if you're rewarding people for effort and attitude, right, versus for real results. Okay. These are the outcomes that we want. That's what we've got to drive towards. I know you've put in a lot of time and effort. We appreciate that. But the result isn't there. We need to get that outcome. Right? Then, do you monitor and manage time or outcomes? Clock watch. Right? Are people coming in at 8 and leaving at 4:30? Or are you managing that and you soft on the outcomes? Or are you soft on that but hard on the outcomes? As long as the outcomes are there. Right? And do you wear your 18-hour days as a badge of honor, right? Which it's not in the modern economy, right? So the first step of what you've got to do is you've got to focus on your highest value activities that energize you the most, right? You know what your core zone of genius is, the things that you're really, really good at, and that can really move the business forward. Those are the things that you should be focusing on, right? As the leader of the business. Yeah. So there's this thing called the 80-20 rule, and that is that 20% of what you're doing every day is generating 80% of your true results. So most of the time, we're doing unproductive things, okay? But 20% of the time, we're doing productive things that really, really count. They're things that move the business forward, generate new sales, improve the business, tie up a partner, etc., etc. But if you go and do an analysis of your time, you'll probably find that is a very, very small percentage of your time, right? So what we want to do is spend more and more of our time, energy, and effort on the 20%, and make the 20% become 30% and 40% and so on, and do systematically less and less and less of the unimportant and reactive things. So the first thing to do here is to spend the next week or two just keeping a log in 15-minute increments or 30-minute increments of how you're spending your time every day. And do that for a week to 2 weeks. Right? And then take what you've got and break that down into 4 categories. Okay? So the first category is low value, under leveraged, it's wasteful stuff. All the irritating things that keep you busy, but actually don't add any value to you or the business, right? There's a lot of those things. It could be social media, it could be interruptions, phone calls, external phone calls from insurance companies trying to sell you stuff. All those kind of things are category 1 things, and they take up more time than we ever think, right? Category 2 stuff is, it's important, must-do work. It doesn't necessarily move the business forward, but if you don't do it, you could be in trouble. So it could be things like, compliance stuff, SARS, tax returns, all those kind of things are things that must get done. They don't move your business forward, but if you don't do them, then you're going to run into problems. So those are category 2 things, and those things you want to be as efficient as possible in getting them done. Yeah. Category 3 things are where you start doing value creating work. Often this type of work earns you new revenue somewhere along the line, right? But it's what we call unleveraged, right? So signing up a new client would be an example, or working on a new sales, a new sales document for a particular client, or something like that, proposal, and so on. That would be category 3 work, right? It's valuable, it moves the business forward, it could generate revenue or helps to generate revenue in some way. And then category 4 is high leverage, value creating work, the stuff that's usually the most motivating. So the other example was like a JV partner, getting a joint venture partner, where you spend 4 hours with that partner is going to get you 100 new deals this year. That's a high leverage way of getting a big impact with small hours, right? Because there's a lot of leverage there. And so what you want to do is you then want to look at how much of your time is actually being spent in Cat 1, Cat 2, Cat 3, and Cat 4. And the idea then is, how can we reduce Category 1 work and Category 2 work? What can we do? And I'll touch on that in a second. But, if we can save just, let's say we're spending 20% of our time over the 2 weeks on Category 1, if we can get that down to 10%, right, and save some time on Category 2, maybe we're spending 40% time there and get it down to 30%, that means we've got 20% saved here. If we could spend that time, let's say 10% extra on Category 3 and 10% extra on Category 4, what you've done here is you've basically, on Category 4, you've doubled your impact. This is where you're making the most impact for your business. You've basically doubled your impact. And what you want to do as the owner or the CEO or founder is you want to, quarter after quarter, be moving yourself upwards, up the ladder, right? More and more Cat 1 work offloaded and Cat 2 work simplified or offloaded as well, so that you can spend more time on Category 3 or Category 4 work, because that's where the difference is going to be made. If you've got your head down in the operations all the time and you're firefighting and you packaging and you're doing all kinds of things that you shouldn't be doing, you don't have any time for the Cat 3 and Cat 4 and growing your business. Right? So that is the challenge that business owners and entrepreneurs face, is as they're growing and scaling their business, the demands on their time becomes bigger and bigger and bigger. And those demands are more reactive and more have to do with the daily operational items, which pushes you down the ladder, right? Down to the lower categories and away from the upper categories. Okay. So to do this then, first thing then, once you know how you spend your time, is then to say, okay, all those Category 1 activities, how can I get rid of that? Can I delegate? What can I delegate? Who can do this other than me? Don't think, how am I going to do this? Think, who's going to do this? Right? The other thing is, maybe some work doesn't actually need to be done. You're doing it, but it's not really absolutely essential. If it's not at that point in time, drop it, right? Some work can maybe be deferred. So I'll talk about this, the levels of stages of growth. If you're in the early stages where you're focusing on, validating your product, etc., don't spend time now on things like putting certain systems in place for admin. Defer that to the right time. Do things in the right order, right? Do the high value things that you need to focus on now to get you to the next level. And then try and design it out, try and systemize it, create a procedure or a process, automate it if you can, but let somebody else drive that process so that you don't have to do it. And then, very important, create a stop doing list. As you're going through those 2 weeks of tracking your time and so on, keep a separate list. And when you're sitting in that meeting thinking, hell, do I actually need to be here? What value am I adding, or can I add? Can I just get the minutes afterwards? Right? What do I need to stop doing to free up my time? So a typical stop doing list is something like this, where you've got your activity, and then what is the action I'm going to take? Am I going to delegate this activity, drop it, defer it, design it out? Right. Then in your Category 2 activities, you've got to be as efficient as possible. And this could be certain meetings that you must attend. Right? But if you're going to attend those meetings, all meetings must have a purpose. What's the outcome that we want from the meeting? What's the agenda the process to get us to those outcomes. And stop having those meetings that are just called on a whim, where things go around for hours and hours in circles and nothing is concluded at the end. Stop using emails to communicate, right? Use collaboration technology where you can find the status of things, you can communicate a lot easier, and so on. Email is really a 1980s product, right? Plan better for category 2 activities. Make sure things are really, really efficient. Avoid duplication, and make sure you're only touching things once. Right? So if you get an email with something to be done, if it can be done in the next 5 minutes, do it. Otherwise, delegate it, etc. But don't put it aside and then come back and have to reread it and redecide what you're going to do. And so try and touch things once. Right? And then your category 3 and 4 activities, you should take the freed up time that you have and focus it on your most valuable items, things that can create a breakthrough for you or generate new revenue for you, or improve your efficiency, or reduce your costs. Those kind of things that can make a breakthrough for you. Focus on those important things, right? Focus on leveraged activities, right? So if you're going to do marketing to a group of, let's say, distributors, and you can get 50 of them in a room, and you can have one event where you're trying to, sign them up, is a lot more efficient than visiting them one by one, right? So look at leveraged activities, and then look at where your company is in the growth process, and focus on the right thing at the right time. And so let me touch on that. Right? So what should you be focusing on in your business right now? That's often quite a challenging question that I get from clients who are freeing up time and then saying, but I've got this spare time, I've got this urge to go back to what I'm doing because otherwise I feel guilty. I want to be busy anyway, but I'm not quite sure what I should be focusing on, right? And if you look at the 5 stages model of growth, that often helps to define what kind of things you should be focusing on. So every company goes through these stages, and you will struggle to get to the next stage if the previous stage hasn't really been well bedded down. So we start off at this infancy stage, right? And this stage is really about, it's not that your company is necessarily, a startup. It could be going for a long time already. But in this phase, it's really about who's your ideal client, what problem are you solving with them, what's your offer to those, to those people. Do they really value it and want it? Are they willing to pay what you want to charge for it? It's that kind of positioning work that validates that you've got something that will be in demand by the right people, right? A lot of work needs to go in there before you can go into what I call our helter-skelter, right? And it's red because there's a lot of blood flowing here. This is when you try to start building up a predictable, repeatable, and growing set of sales, right? So this is all about marketing, lead generation, closing sales, and getting the revenue flowing predictably. Right? Once you're in this phase, then you can get into the order phase. And this is where you start to create a lot more systemization, a lot more structure, so that your operations can run smoothly without your day-to-day involvement in that business. And this is what enables you to really, really grow, right? If you've got the right demand and the right sales processes, then it's about how do you open up your internal challenges to be able to grow faster and handle more sales. So this will give you the opportunity to really, really start growing and scaling, right? If you get that right, the next phase here is where you now starting to have the systems and processes in place. You can handle a lot more demand, but often coordination starts to become a big challenge here between the various functional areas that you've now created, right? You're getting 10 new major clients coming in. The operations guys are ready, but the training guys weren't told about it. And so chaos starts to reign because of the coordination between these various areas. And it really starts to talk about how do you orchestrate the capacity and the capability across these various areas to really scale, scale up. And if you've got that in place, yeah, you can then, the market is then the next constraint. How can I get more into my business? Can I duplicate? Can I, franchise? What can I do? So if you're in this stage over here, the infancy stage, it doesn't help you try to focus on getting a COO, etc. That's required at this phase, right? Or trying to put spending a lot of time and energy putting a particular admin system in place and so on. This phase enables you to go and do sales, and this is the validation phase. You get that right, your sales will be able to flow. You get your sales systems in and predictable, then you've got quite a bit of demand, so you've got the cash, and you're now starting to be forced to be more structured, right? So you've got to focus on the right things in the right order to be able to scale. And often people jump way beyond this with a product or a service, and an offer that hasn't really been well thought out, and they try to drive the sales, and it starts to go wrong because the profitability is low and they're not getting the sales and so on. Okay, so I've sent you this Entrepreneur's Impact Multiplier. Okay. What I'd like to maybe do is just quickly run through this and just give you a sense of how to do this for for yourselves. So I've used example I've used in another topic before, a company called Laughing Socks, Pty Limited. And let's say this company is in the early stages of growth. They're starting to build sales. They're unsure of who the ideal customer is. They need revenue and cash flow. And the CEO is this guy called Crazy Joe with all these crazy, crazy ideas. Typical entrepreneur. That's what we do. The world thinks we're mad, but we can see a bit of a vision, right? So if you think about the stages of growth where this company is, it's in the early phases, right? The infant and helter-skelter, infancy and helter-skelter type of phase of growth, right? So the CEO is completely overwhelmed, doing everything, right? And starts to spend a bit of time doing an analysis, and then starts to have a look at how to, sorry. I'm going to do that so I can type in there, right? Okay, so he starts to have a look at what are his, what are his time wasters here, right? It could simply be things like, let's say, unproductive meetings, doing the books, invoicing, doing all of those kinds of things, a whole lot of stuff, that's unproductive. Category 2, must do things. There's certain, like, let's say, meetings with certain stakeholders that must take place, but these things really need to be effective. Also looking after the compliance things like SARS, subsea, etc., and so on. And then the high value things are things like getting the e-commerce store, selling those socks, running sales campaigns, or doing sales. That's a lot of the times going into improving that e-commerce store, and then marketing and advertising. Those are the kinds of things there that generating the revenue. But over here, the category 4 things are maybe things like new product design, new product designs, because they've got a limited range, and so there's a limited appetite at this point in time. It could be, new distribution channels. Could be another one. It could also be tying up with a social media influencer. Someone who's got a lot of influence on social media, maybe on TikTok or whatever, that can promote the product, right? So those would be typically category 4 type of things that this person would focus on, right? Because they're in that early phase and they're not sure about who the ideal client is, I would put that kind of activity, ideal client, niche and value proposition to that group would be high up on the category 4, the category 4 work. So the CEO would then start to get a much better view of how he's currently spending his or her time, and what they should be trying to get rid of, or trying to delegate and so on, and trying to spend more and more time on the category 3 and especially the category 4 items. Now, as the company grows and it goes into different phases, the category 4 would become something different, right? So this wouldn't be like this forever. Once these things are in place and the company now has let's say, a stable pipeline of growth, got validated demand for its products and services, then the next category 4 things would be maybe starting to build a bit of a leadership team or systems and structures, and getting the organogram sorted out and getting the right people in the right seats. Those could become the next category 4 things that would then move the business forward, right? So the stop doing list then, if this founder starts to think about it, is all those unproductive meetings. Some of them just drop them and delegate maybe the important ones, or the ones where there needs to be a representation. The compliance, maybe see can it delegate, find somebody to do that, or get an accountant to do that, or so. The invoicing, doing the books, all those kind of things, finding other people, alternatives to be able to do that, so that it can free up the time for this person to do the high value work. So it's good then also just to sit down and think about your mental model factors. What is it? Okay, and maybe it's things like, if I want it done, I must do it myself. And maybe that's a biggie for this person. Or if I'm not working 18 hours, I'm not leading the business. Okay, these kinds of fallacies, right, should be dumping as much of this work as possible and then spending high quality time on this. Right? And if you're not working 18 hours anymore, but you're now working 8 hours on this, the impact of that is 10 times bigger, 1,000 times bigger than working 18 hours on this. Right? So that's the important things. Then things to delegate. So what are those things I'm going to delegate? And you can list these things over here. Things I want to defer. So maybe I'm working on the wrong things in the wrong order. What do I defer to a later stage? What is important to do, but not the most important thing right now, given where we are in the phase of growth? So I'll defer that to a later stage. What can I design out or create a system around, maybe automate to get things done? So maybe part of the invoicing, get an accountant to do that, but you know, these days with systems, online systems like Xero and so on, you can just take a photo of the thing that you purchased, upload it to the system, and the accountant's got all the information there. So that would be an example of I've systemized this thing, whereas in the past I needed to go and capture the invoice, store it somewhere, go through that whole process. Things to delete. So perhaps certain meetings that I'm just not going to attend anymore because it's adding no value to anybody. Right? Then starting to look at, so what are the habits I must overcome? What are the personal habits I must overcome? And a common one that I often see is something that was an article in the Harvard Business Review maybe 20 years ago, but it's still relevant today. It's called Who's Got the Monkey? And the idea behind that is when you've got a task to do, on your to-do list, each task is like a monkey on your shoulder, right? And so if you're doing all those tasks, obviously your time is taken up. The idea is delegate that. So in other words, take the monkey off your shoulder and put it on somebody else's shoulder that can do the task. But the problem is this, that if we've got the wrong habits, like walking down the passage and you meet the person, you say, so how are you doing with that task? They say, great, you know, I'm about 80% through, but, you know, I don't know how to get hold of so-and-so. I know you've got a great relationship with them. Don't you want to please just try and get hold of them for me and get me that information? Okay. The minute you say yes, the monkeys jump back onto your own shoulder, right? And the person who is delegated to do the task has got one thing less on their to-do list, and you've got another thing on your to-do list. Right? And if you've got that habit and you delegate it to 10 people and all 10 are giving you things back, you know, you're never going to be rid of your own thing. So that's maybe a habit to overcome. So I'm just going to write you, you know, who's got the monkey? Monkey. Become more aware of not taking work back, as an example. Right. So once you've done this and you've got a really, really good idea of what you want to delegate, what you're going to design, what you're going to defer, and this, you know, happens over time, doesn't happen immediately, you can then stand back and say, okay, what over the next 90 days, the next quarter, should be my priority things that I've got to deliver as the leader of the business? What is it that if I do that is going to really move our business forward? Okay. And it should be in this category 4, category 3 type of work. you should be prioritizing out of that and saying, right, the most important of all these things that I need to do right now is maybe that ideal client niche and value proposition to validate that. That is maybe the thing that is going to take up the full 90 days, but that's got to be my one priority. And all my freed up time should go into making sure that that is done. Because if that is done, I can, in the next 90 days, move on to the other things, step by step by step. And so the use of my time in the next 90 days, if I know what the current is, let's say 10, 30, 40, let's say 30, or whatever it is, I can now start to say, okay, I want to get this down to maybe 10, right? And I want to get this down to 30. So I've basically saved myself 30, right? And I maybe want to put 10 there, and I want to spend 20% of my time there, right? Short here somewhere. Okay. So maybe this becomes 40% of my time. Sorry. So this is how I want to spend my time. And that way I can start to consciously start keeping track on, am I achieving it, or am I moving closer and closer towards that goal, even if I can't do it immediately, right? It's usually a process, because you can't just change your diary and other people's habits and your own habits overnight. But if I could start slowly, quarter by quarter, this is maybe a bit excessive for one quarter, right? But maybe quarter by quarter, I can save a bit of time and edge my way up the value ladder, so that I'm slowly spending more and more and more time on the more important things that are going to really move the business forward. So guys, use that tool to help you focus on what is really important. Stop looking at what you're going to get rid of, delegate, defer, design out, etc., drop, and start to consciously refocus your time on things that will grow your business. So there's a saying, you do not rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. It's not about just having those goals, but without the right systems in place, like how you manage your focus, energy, and your time, unless you have that, you won't be able to achieve those goals. You rise to the level of the quality of that system that you have. Okay, Dave, any thoughts around that? I'm open to any questions, any ideas, any insights.
Oh, there's a lot of valuable stuff to consider. I think the point you made is obviously to be very structured in your approach to this, because if you're not structured in it, then you tend to drop balls in different parts, my view.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is that if you don't critically analyze properly, you're doing yourself a disservice. So when it comes to the left side of the table, what I looked when you ended up filling in the form on the right-hand side, it's probably always important to be at probably 60% if you're the CEO, above the line for 3 and 4.
Yeah, yes,
okay,
as much as possible.
As you say, or even sometimes it could be 70% if you're but if you're in your own small business, it's probably more, or your own business initially, and you're growing it, you don't always get to be 60 or 70, because you don't always have the manpower to do stuff, and you can't always delegate or defer or what you call it,
Design it out. Yeah,
pay it out to a service provider. So to me, category 4 and 3, and I think that's one of the items we face at the moment, is determining different roles, and we haven't finalized that down. We keep talking around the table on it, but it's never clearly a thing. And as you said, on the far right-hand side, habits to overcome is the monkey. Is make sure when the monkey's on your shoulder, you do that job. You know, so somebody in sort of in our example, or an example I've told you previously, it's always at the high level, and a lot of the stuff that maybe category 2 that you refer to, some of the actions that were needed there, have been neglected or never done, which then compounds the problem at a later stage when certain compliance issues or agreements are not in place.
Absolutely.
And then the comment is passed, but it's not my strong point. But that's fine. But at the same time, you must understand the pressure it compounds onto the current circumstances if those things have to suddenly be attended to, or if you need to go and talk to people and that's not in place, then they ask why, it could create a negative impact. But that's for another discussion.
Absolutely. The more structured you become, even in your early days,
you got it.
Easier
you've got to tidy up those things that it doesn't create an uncomfortable feeling at a later stage for people wanting to join you or look at you or things like that. The one item which, I mean, I understand the stop to doing this is important, but the mental model factors are also important.
Yes.
And I had the word there, mindset. Because it could be fear, it could be the unknown, it could be saying, well, I don't know, and you don't do something about it. So, or as you said in the example, you don't want to delegate. So that's, I think the mental model is also very important and extremely an item that you mustn't neglect, because that obviously your mindset influences your behaviors, influences your actions. So,
absolutely.
Lots of people talk about that. How do you step off the curb with confidence and do something and believe in something? And obviously the actions to release time, that is also important, the different things. But I'll go back to the issue there where you came down to the far right side. I mean, obviously the habits to overcome the monkey to me is a important element, but the focus for the next 90 days, and you've got to always remember that you have to be flexible, because as you rightfully said earlier, different things in category 3 and category 4 evolve as the business grows. So when it goes back to that 5-step picture you put up, with infancy, helter-skelter, order, I think sometimes we probably vacillate between helter-skelter and order, and then drop back sometimes to infancy to think on something, and then we get back into helter-skelter. So you got that, to me, is also very important. You got to understand where you are to ensure that, as you say, the systems that you put in place take away some of the stuff, or you delegate it to somebody else or somebody on the team, so that the MD or the ops person is focusing clearly on that's vital for them and not doing stuff they shouldn't be, that you could do in their place. It allows them to go to a category 3 or a category 4 in their own space. Because everybody's probably slightly different. So you're talking from the CEO perspective in this one now, the example. But the other people in the same time on your team need to have their own category 3s and 4s.
Yes, absolutely, right.
And it aligns with the overall goal of the business.
Absolutely. Otherwise, you know what happens, Dave, is you get a lot of busyness in the company, right? And there's always a lot of things to keep people busy, right? But the busyness is not leading to any growth.
And that's
People are-
right. So, we talk about, the different roles. Been talking about that for a long time. We've got to sit around the table and say, okay, that's pass the monkey onto somebody, and that person goes and does that. Yeah.
Yeah,
Because
absolutely.
then you start focusing on the things that leverage, sometimes I might go and deliver something to a customer, but there's an agenda there, is that you're going to keep nurturing a relationship, that it might open the door for somewhere else at the same time. You don't just pass it on to somebody else to go and deliver. You're trying to probably use different scenarios to open the door for opportunities for yourself.
Yeah,
But, so sometimes you get criticized for doing something, but if you don't do it and you don't tidy it up and you go and see somebody, it might grow your credibility or your reputation.
yeah, absolutely.
But the problem is you can't keep doing it every day, all the time.
Yeah. So you got to look at it strategically, right? So you got to look at the big picture of where you want to go,
Yeah.
what's important to you, and then which phase of growth are you in right now, and what's the top priority you should be spending your time on. Because the reality is we get sucked down. We just do. We get sucked down into the operational things, and if you're not aware of that, you become the bottleneck to growth. Right?
So if you go back to that slide of yours where you had the laughing sock thing?
Yeah.
And you said it's, what was it? Early stages of growth, building sales. That's where we are. And suddenly we're starting to say we're unsure who the ideal customer is. It goes back to that discussion you and I had the other day, the niche you want to play in.
Yes, absolutely.
So when I saw this slide, it resonated very much with me. Yeah.
So that's the work of the infancy phase there, if I can call it that. And as I said, it doesn't mean that the company's 3 months old or a startup. It could be 5 years old already. But unless you're very clear about what who your ideal customer is, what's the problem you're solving, what's the offer you have to solve it, how do you position yourself to be attractive to that grouping, unless you have got that right, the next levels become difficult, if not impossible.
Yeah. And that's a very important point you just said, was it doesn't matter, you could be 3 or 4 or 5 years old. So we probably know who the customers are, and the problem is we now vacillating what is the best business model to get to those people, because retail companies make it very difficult for startups or new businesses to get in, or they don't give you positioning or space. Yeah. Plus, you don't have the same marketing as some of the bigger brands to get the awareness out there. So that's one of the items we now revisiting clearly to say, what is the right business model for us to keep getting our products out there? Is it the direct sales model, or is it a hybrid model? That's where we need to determine it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's
which niches do we want to play? But you can decide what your niche is, but you still got to determine how you get to those niches.
Yeah, so that's all part of this early stage work, right?
Yeah.
If you've got that, you can then put the marketing and the sales channels in place. Yeah. And then you can, once you've got the volume, you can start to structure yourself.
That's it, yeah. And that's why I said we're probably at 2 in many instances, and suddenly we move to 3 in 1 or 2 areas, 1 or 2 spaces, but then we come back to 2 in others. Yeah.
Yeah, what often happens as well is you've got an offer, you've got a niche, you start putting marketing and sales channels into place. You start getting to a space where you plateau again, you can't grow further. And maybe you realize then, well, that wasn't the right niche, so you've got to pivot,
Yeah.
right? So basically,
That's the word I was trying to say. We're probably having to pivot a little bit from our initial thinking. We've tried some of the retail, we get some progress, but then suddenly you hit a brick wall for some reasons, that I've spoken to you about in the past, because we don't always allocate things correctly, capital, and that creates further problems. So.
Yeah, so like COVID forced a lot of people to pivot. They had to go back and think about, so what do we offer now to who? How do we reach them, right? And how do we organize for that? So there could be things that force you to pivot, like COVID environment for restaurants or travel agencies and so on. They had to make major adjustments, starting right at the beginning again. But it could be that. It could also be you realize this is not the niche I actually want to serve. It's not as profitable as we thought, etc. So you might have to go through this process again, right? So it's not always just a straightforward step up. It can be a messy process.
Sure. No, good, perfect, good, valuable,
Yeah. So there we are. All right. Okay. Great. Anything else, Dave? Any questions?
No. Enjoyed it. Yeah, it was some food for thought, which will help me for a little bit later.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Valuable. Thanks for your time, Peter.
Okay, and if anybody wants to hop onto our weekly meeting, go onto my website, subscribe to the newsletter, and you'll be notified every week of the upcoming training.
Awesome.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, Peter. Chat to you.
See you next one. Cheers.
Ciao.
Bye now.
Bye.